Chapter 1. The Beginning. April. Birds are chirping. It's already about +14 outside, but with the bright sun illuminating everything around, you want to open up and let the fresh spring wind flow smoothly around you, cooling you down a little. Max stood in front of the window with a cup of coffee, watching happy children running around the street, jumping in spring puddles. The German Shepherd guard dog, Lucy, came up to Max and sat down next to him, watching the nimble sparrows jumping, like the children, in the puddle under the window. Max scratched her behind the ear. She responded with a whine. "What? Are you hungry?" Max asked with a kind smile. Lucy responded with a grumble and stood up impatiently. "Well then," Max said, standing in front of the open refrigerator, "what will you choose for breakfast?" Lucy approached him and looked curiously into the refrigerator. After sniffing everything a bit, she stopped at the sandwich that Max had made for himself. "Do you want my breakfast again?" Max asked her, puzzled. Lucy answered. "Okay." Max softened. "I still have 2 more." At the word 2 more, Lucy immediately turned her head to Max, as if showing that if he allowed her, she would not limit herself to 1 sandwich. "No way," Max said, causing Lucy to purr discontentedly. "Have breakfast and let's go pack." The day before, Max took a vacation in order to rest and indulge in his favorite hobby. He loved to explore caves with his dog Lucy. Sometimes they found beautiful stones that Max collected for his collection, and sometimes they just wandered around the caves enjoying the deathly silence, broken only by the dripping from the ceiling of the caves. "Lucy, where are you? It's time to go out." Max couldn't find his dog Lucy. Lucy ran out of the closet, holding a squeaker in her teeth. "No, we won't go with this," Max said with a smile. "We don't need this." Lucy ran into the closet and ran out with another toy, a bone. "Lucy, bring your collar, and we don't need anything else." The dog ran into the closet again and came back with a green collar with flowers painted on it. Lucy chose this collar herself when Max went to the pet store with her. "Are you ready? Let me put the collar on and let's go." About 15 minutes passed. Max and Lucy arrived where they needed to go and began their descent. "Be careful, don't fall," Max said to Lucy, who had already started climbing into the cave. Max took the rope, tied it around himself and attached the carabiner to his belt. Well, with God. And 5 minutes later, Max and his faithful dog Lucy found themselves in the darkness of the cave. Chapter 2. Slap, slap, slap. He always prepared carefully for his forays. He and Lucy planned to just wander around the cave and come back to find the place where they came from. Max hooked a spare rope at the entrance to the cave so that he could unwind it along the way, and so that, like in the myth of the Minotaur, he could return along the rope to the exit. Once at the bottom, Max first checked the contents of the backpack to make sure they hadn't forgotten anything. And this is what was in the backpack: a box with 6 sandwiches with sausage, 2 small flashlights, a huge flashlight, a camera, Lucy's treats, a spare rope, 3 carabiners, a large bottle of water and 2 small ones in the side compartments. The backpack was heavy, but Max knew that he hadn't taken anything extra. Having hooked the rope, Max called Lucy, who had already run into the depths. "Lucy, don't run ahead. You'll have time to run around. Wait for me." Lucy stopped, but not because Max called her. She became alert and moved her ears towards the hole in the cave wall. Max listened. It really was audible, as if someone was slapping barefoot on a stone. Gradually, this sound died down. Did it seem that way? No, the dog's sense of smell couldn't have failed, so there was definitely someone in the cave. Otherwise, Lucy wouldn't have paid attention to it, Max thought. and began to listen anxiously. Silence. They walked for about 20 minutes, and all this time they didn't hear a sound. Gradually, Max calmed down completely, but suddenly, slap, slap, slap. Lucy stood at attention and bared her teeth, looking at the passage from which they had come. What the hell? Max couldn't understand where such a sound could come from in the cave. The slapping stopped, and a loud clat was heard. The rope loosened, or rather, it simply fell, and it became clear that it would be difficult to find the exit now. What? What the hell? Max couldn't find an explanation for this event. Every cell of his body tensed, as if before a jump. Lucy rushed to where the slapping went. Max ran after her. Just in case, Max put his hand in his pocket and felt his air pistol there, which he always took just in case, although he himself could not explain why he did it at all. But apparently, the pistol could come in handy at the moment. Suddenly, Lucy stopped and listened. Silence. She did not smell the one who cut the rope. Although this was strange for her, Max taught her very well, and she could distinguish the smell of the victim from a kilometer away. And now, just in mute stupor, they came across a fork. One passage went down into the depths, and the other led the opposite way up. Moreover, this hole was located in such a way that it was very difficult to get into it, and there was nothing for a dog to do there. Perhaps the unknown had hidden there, and although Max could easily climb in there, he did not dare leave Lucy alone. No other sounds were heard. Only the digging from the ceilings of the cave disturbed the deathly, and, at the moment, as it seemed to Max, oppressive silence. Chapter 3. No Way Out. For almost an hour, Max and Lucy had been walking along the ominous corridor of the caves, trying to find a way out. For some reason, they hadn't even found the end of the broken rope. Along the way, they came across some rather strange finds, like red inscriptions, bones, and scratches on the walls. Moreover, the scratches were from claws. Lucy stopped and began to sniff some stones standing near the wall of the cave. However, Max didn't pay attention to this and continued to study the scratches on the wall, trying to somehow tame the panic due to the fact that they were lost. Lucy quietly growled, calling Max. He slowly approached and leaned over to the dog. She began to point her nose at the stone. Well, let me see. Max moved the stone and stood in a stupor. Behind the stone there was a hole in the floor, and in the hole, in the very depths, lay a leather-bound notebook. He took it out and carefully opened it. The pages smelled of dust. Apparently, the notebook had been lying here for a long time. The unexpected find amazed Max. On the cover of the notebook was signed R.T. Deadlow, 2003, 07-19. Wow, thought Max. This notebook is about 16 years old. It's 2019 now. He opened it. After some scribbling about everyday life, interesting entries began. 2003, 07-28. Jerry and I went to explore the cave. So far, so good. 2003, 07-29. We're lost. We can't find the exit. I'm paranoid, but for some reason Jerry is calm and feels at home here. 2003, 07-30. It was as if Jerry had ended up in his old home, which he hadn't visited for many years. I don't like his behavior. 2003, 07-31. Jerry is bald. Yes, it sounds strange, but it's a fact. He says it's nothing, and I see that he's even happy about it. It's all so strange. 2003, 0802. My friend has become thin, hunched over, and has become such that I don't recognize him anymore. The food is running out, and Jerry is sitting and sharpening his teeth with a stone. Why? Then the handwriting got worse, as if someone was writing with a trembling hand. I don't know what day it is. It tried to eat me, to tear me apart. I ran away, but it seems to me that IT knows these caves inside out, and it will find me. It's nearby. Then the writing stopped. Suddenly Max noticed that Lucy was not next to him. Chapter 4. The Find. He looked around. Silence. No sign of Lucy. He ran down the passage in a panic and stopped. In the depths, in the very darkness, he heard a whimper. He ran toward the sound and, oh God, Lucy was lying on the floor, pinned by a stone, blood oozing from a wound on her paw. Max examined the paw. Bite marks were visible. He stroked Lucy's head calmingly and began to lift the stone. Being strong enough, he was able to lift the stone and free Lucy, but she could not get up because of the wound in her paw. Poor thing, does it hurt? Lucy only whined pitifully. It's okay, let me carry you in my arms. He picked up Lucy in his arms and carefully, as if he were carrying a baby, began to walk forward along the passage. Not knowing where he was going, he walked wherever his eyes looked, because the situation was hopeless. He walked and walked until he came across human remains. It was obvious that they had been lying there for a long time. Near the skeleton lay a closed backpack, covered in dust. Max carefully laid Lucy on the floor and began to rummage through the backpack. There, to his luck, he found a first aid kit containing bandages and antibiotics. The bandages were falling apart in his hands, but he gathered them into a pile and wrapped Lucy's paw. Only when he had finished bandaging did he decide to examine the remains. The skeleton was wearing torn clothes, and there was a stone in its hand. Max carefully took it out of the corpse's hand. There were dried drops of blood on the stone. Then Max searched the backpack more thoroughly and found a keychain attached to it. Initials were carved on it. _R.T. Deadlow_. Chapter 5. And the shortest. We're not welcome here. Max stood there dumbfounded. It seemed to him that he had seen those initials somewhere before. Suddenly, he remembered where. He quickly opened his backpack and took out the diary he had found in the cave. The same initials were written on the cover of the diary. Suddenly, at that very moment, he heard a slapping sound, but much closer than before. Lucy raised her head and growled a little. Hearing these sounds, Max took out his pistol and army knife. The sounds died down. He picked Lucy up in his arms and walked on, stumbling with every step. Finally, he decided to rest and put Lucy on the floor and gave her a couple of bones. Listening, he sat down next to Lucy. He himself did not want to eat because of the stress, but he still took out a sandwich and began to chew it. The tightness of the caves weighed on him, as did the deathly silence. Before, he only liked that it was so quiet around him, and he could collect his thoughts, but not this time. Suddenly, he heard that damned slapping again. What's going on? Lucy raised her head again and jumped up, despite her injured paw. And then, the one who was making those sounds appeared in front of them. Chapter 6. Exit. It was large and very thin. Its arms hung to the floor, and the creature itself was hunched over and bald. Its mouth was round, revealing a row of fangs as sharp as knives. Its paws were decorated with claws. Max was scared. He immediately pulled out his gun. The creature moved forward with an angry roar, and Max immediately fired. Although the gun was an air gun, at close range it did a lot of damage. IT let out a squeal and ran away. Lucy rushed after it, overcoming the pain in her paw, and the last one in this chain was a frightened Max. The creature was already far away, but because of the bloody trail, Max and Lucy had no trouble catching up with it. Gradually, they caught up with him, and suddenly Max saw. Oh God, could it be? He saw the creature climbing up the rocks to a hole in the ceiling of the cave, and a piece of sky was visible there. Max fired at the creature 2 more times and heard its muffled wheeze. He had wounded it, but it had managed to escape. Max immediately climbed up those rocks, and the already weakened Lucy followed him. He climbed onto the first ledge, stretched out his arms, and pulled Lucy to him. Then he lifted her onto the next ledge, and he himself climbed towards her, and so their movement upward continued. And then, finally, Max was hit with fresh air. He was happier than ever. He heard the rustling of leaves that the wind sorted through. He heard the chirping of insects, and it seemed that he stood like that for an eternity. He was torn from his dreams by Lucy's groan. The poor dog was already very weak, and Max picked her up and walked away from these caves into the silence of the night forest they had climbed out into. Soon they saw a river, and Max put Lucy down next to it. He took off the bandages and washed her paw. Then he tore off a piece of his t-shirt and bandaged it. Meanwhile, Lucy drank from this small river, and Max picked her up and walked along it. About an hour later, he heard the sounds of car engines and immediately rushed towards the sound. They found themselves on the side of the road, right next to the bridge. Max saw a passing taxi and raised his hand. The car stopped. "Excuse me, could you give me a ride? Unfortunately, I can't pay for the ride right now, but when you take me to my house, I'll give you as much as you want." The taxi driver agreed, and on the way Max told him everything, but kept quiet about the monster. He simply said that he had been exploring caves with his dog and that she had hurt her paw and that she needed help. The taxi driver took them home and Max brought him the money. At home, he had already bandaged and treated Lucy's wound properly. Then he left her on the couch and went to bed. He woke up from the sound of slapping near his house.